Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates, viewers. It's a beautiful Monday morning, and for all you students, you should be already in school. So if you're not there yet, you need to make sure you're not late for your first day of school. Now, if you had been preparing for school, especially over the weekend, I know a lot of parents were out there making sure they get the necessary groceries and so on. You have to realize that there is a shortage of certain items on the shelves, like bread. We for the past week we've been struggling to get just the regular bread, because unfortunately our bakeries they're not producing enough bread from on the island, at least not yet. Maybe that's something that we can work on. I mean, certainly something that's spoken about for the past few years, about the need to work on things like producing certain basic items here in Tobago. But nonetheless, we are continually dependent on Trinidad. And at this point in time, we are affected by another situation on the sea bridge where the Cabo Star remains down for repairs. As you know, a couple of weeks ago, they experienced a fire on board. And while the engineers on board was able to quickly put out the fires to minimize the damage, and there were no injuries, any sort of that thing, the vessel remains down for repairs to make sure that it is back and running properly. It has to get its recertifications and so on, and we have no idea when that's going to happen. And until then, our business sector is challenged. So joining us to give us a perspective on some of those challenges, as well as some other inter-island challenges that we're facing at this point in time, we have the Secretary of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation, Ms. Tashia Burris, on with us. Good morning and welcome to you.
Good morning, Kandace, and thank you for the invitation. Good morning to your viewers, those online, those listening. Thank you for having me.
Now, I mean, you said a couple of weeks ago when you were on Full Disclosure, you had quite a lot to say about, what was going on in the air bridge. But not long after that, we had a situation about with the Cabo Star developing.
Yeah.
From your end, what's going on your end about it?
Listen, I mean, I don't know if it is that one piece of rain starts to fall and then a thunderstorm comes right after. But I think that what we have to do is look at the opportunities that are created when crisis arises. So you started your conversation about mentioning that there's a shortage of bread. And I was one of those many parents getting into the grocery over the weekend to shop for items for the opening of the new school term. And the first thing, I walked into Penny Savers Canby and I saw these empty shelves. And the first thing I thought was, in 2023, Tobago can't produce enough bread to feed ourselves, so that, let's just say, KISS winds up, KISS closes down. Does it then mean that we as an island, there are no businesses, there are no set of businesses that could come together and make an investment, make a pitch to the THA, let us come in to invest some money, let private sector come in and invest some money, and let us tackle something that I see is a basic, which is bread. So the thing is, we have flour on the shelves, but we don't have any bread. So it means that one of two things has to happen. Is either people need to start baking their bread again and not depending on KISS to bring up the bread regularly. Because, I mean, that is just what is happening with the Cabo Star. Based on the last update that we received from the Port Authority, is that they are waiting for some specialist parts to come in. Once those parts come in, they'll be installed. After that, the boat has to be inspected again, and then it has to be recertified. That process ideally maybe should take 2 weeks or so. We're hoping it's less than that, because most definitely, aside from having shortages of food stuff, you're talking about not being able to bring up large pieces of goods such as like lumber and cement and steel for construction, and all of these things have ripple effects in the economy, because when you have scarcity of resources, then it means that the price of items go up. And we already reel in Tobago from an average higher cost of living than our counterparts in Trinidad, so that having the Cabo Star down for this period is severely affecting our ability to maintain prices at a particular level. And I mean, certainly I know that the president of the chamber has come out and indicated that the situation is simply untenable. I've heard reports of trucks being left back in Trinidad because they're trying to make up the slack with the Galleons Passage and put smaller trucks on the fast ferries. The reality is that we kind of also have to plan for when things don't go the way that we want to go, because boats have scheduled maintenance periods where the boats would go off, and then we have experienced that they will tell us in advance the boat has to go off, so they make provisions for extra sailings for persons to stockpile things. But what happens in an emergency? And that is why we have to have a conversation about what do we do when there's a crisis, because when you're talking about mechanical things, they break down naturally. You don't plan for these things. What is the options do we have? Can we immediately put a boat into service? What can the THA do in terms of going out there and finding a boat that could be leased to run alongside, especially if we look at how cargo is moving? Is one boat enough? I mean, these are some questions that we have to begin to ask ourselves, because, again, as I said, we have to look at the crisis for what it is, yes, but then we also have to put plans in place that in case something else happens or something happens, that we have an adequate backup plan that will treat with the fallout.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned all those things are not new. Those ideas,
no, they're not.
Those concepts are not new. And I made a point last Friday when the chamber was present with us, is that it's like we're back in 2017 having the same conversation again, with all the drama. And the thing is that nothing was ever put in place.
I would take you further than 2017. I used to actually work at the Port Authority between 2008 and 2014. And we had this situation when the Superfast Galaxia went. And I could remember being there waiting on a ship they said that they brought into service, and waiting hours for this ship to come. And it took maybe 24 hours for this ship to leave Trinidad to arrive in Tobago. When it came, it was nothing of what was described. And I mean, all of those experiences being on that side of the fence and now sitting in the chair that I sit in, again, for me, it's almost like deja vu. It's a very, very uncomfortable deja vu, because when you look at a THA that is not given our full ask when budget time comes, because if we are given our full ask when budget time comes, then these are some of the things that the THA can look at. Can the THA now go and lease a vessel that can be put into service immediately to pick up some of the slack, or that could run alongside the vessel that is in service from the level of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago?
Is that a suggestion you guys have actually considered?
No, it's not even considering the suggestion. It's a need. It's a critical need. But you see, all of these things cost money. So that's why I come back to the fact that if Tobago is being given its fair share of a budget, it means that if anything happens, we have some funds that we can have available to us to treat with these situations, to have some of the nice things. Because when you ask for your 4 billion thereabouts, you're given 2 billion or so. Yes, when you look at that, you're given half of what you asked for. So it means that when you do your reprioritization exercise, you have to shelve the other 50% of things that you had planned to do. And in that 50% of things that you no longer are able to do because you simply have no money to do it, you have these things that are nice to have, because it means that now Tobago is able to have a second vessel on the sea bridge. So if something goes wrong with the vessel being paid for by the Port Authority, Tobago has its own vessel. You're talking about the air bridge, that if Tobago can wet lease some aircrafts, which is something that has been done in the past, we have the money to do it. These things don't cost $2, they cost millions of dollars. So when you have the job that the Honorable Fali Augustine has as Secretary of Finance to look at the finances of the THA, and you have things like schools needing to reopen and critical repairs to happen, you're talking about critical infrastructure works that have to happen in time for a rainy season. You're talking about ensuring that we have a housing program that gets kick-started, that requires serious investment upfront to get that to happen. Really, it's a long list of priorities, and you simply don't have enough money to meet all of the needs. So now you have to see what exactly is critical. Not that a boat is not critical, but there are a lot of things that other people will argue that are more critical than that. How do you then decide? I don't envy the Chief Secretary, most definitely. But again, I would want Tobagonians to understand that these are the things that we talk about when we talk about advocating for our autonomy. Because why do we now have to wait for a central government to decide whether or not they could put a second boat on the run? It means that THA can now sit down and say, look, we have a crisis. This is a situation that has developed. There's a serious fallout that we can have in terms of the economy if we don't put something to plug this in a temporary basis. What can we do? And we have the powers to do that. But if we don't have the power to act and we don't have the money to act, then it means that we, just like everybody else, will continue to talk about what we can do and all of the ideas, and nothing will go anywhere because we simply don't have the power to act or the money to act on. Yeah.
And and it's what's interesting about this whole conversation is that the government does have the power to make certain things happen, and they're not, or it doesn't seem that they are. And I also want to ask you, have you had any conversations with the Minister of Works and Transport or the Minister of Finance or even the Prime Minister about trying to figure out a way for this situation? Because even as we're calling for autonomy is not going to come yet. Yeah. It might take some time for it to actualize. But in the meantime, this is an emergency situation that needs to be dealt with. Why do we need autonomy right now to deal with it when they can deal with it? So have you been having those conversations?
No, I haven't had those conversations with the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Works or even the Prime Minister himself, because that kind of resides within the realm of the Chief Secretary to do. And I know that he has been having those conversations on a regular basis in terms of ensuring that Tobago can get some of the things that are critical in nature. As always, we always make the case. We always make the business case, that is. In the town hall that we had last week,
yes.
One particular person stood up and he started his remarks by saying, this is a conversation about whether or not Tobago is worth it. And it gave me pause, because in my mind, he kind of summed up everything that we've been trying to say without using the word autonomy. Is Tobago worth putting a second boat on the sea bridge when we recognize that if there is no boat, there is huge economic fallout for the people of Tobago? That is a question. Is Tobago worth it to get additional persons in the space, additional carriers in the space, to treat with the air bridge challenge, because we see that there is a demand for seats, we see that there is a demand for the destination, we see that there is potential in other markets in terms of the US market, the Canadian market, the regional market. Is Tobago worth having those conversations, and not just having the conversations, but making the steps to ensure that it can happen and we can do that and get things done? And when he said, is Tobago worth it, who is to determine Tobago's worth? Is it the people who live here? Is it people who stand in central government and they make all of them agitate for all kinds of things in Trinidad? I was reading an article yesterday that they opened a parkade in San Fernando that cost $132 million. That is the average budget for one division in the Tobago House of Assembly spent on one project for the people of San Fernando. And when you look at the fact that Tobago is an entire island, don't mind our size, but we're an island, it means that Tobago House of Assembly has to do everything. We are in charge of education, we are in charge of healthcare, we are in charge of tourism, we are in charge of housing, we're in charge of infrastructural development. So when people make the argument that the THA is akin to local government is not responsible for healthcare, they're not responsible for schools, they're not responsible for any of that type of major infrastructural development. All of these things reside in ministries. And it is sad that in 2023, people still want to make those comparisons and use that as an argument to continue to deprive Tobago of much needed development. And every time something happens, the conversation starts up again. Is Tobago worth us having the power, having the latitude, having the resources to be able to take care of our people in a particular way? And I think that we are worth it. The people of Tobago have to start to think that we are worth it. And then that strengthens our argument. It strengthens our case, because more and more we realize that it's not even just about what is put in a bill. The reality is that when you look at how we've handled the autonomy conversation over the years, it's a joint select committee or a bunch of people from Trinidad or a couple of people appointed here. They go in the districts, they have consultations, or they say they have consultations, and then they put stuff in a paper and then they go back. But I think that we've been missing the mark for a very long time when we speak about autonomy. We have to show the average person how autonomy affects them. It can't just be a word that they hear bandied about around election time or a word in the dictionary that has no real meaning for them. How does autonomy affect me? What is the role of the THA in terms of explaining to me how autonomy affects me? And I'll give you a very classic example. we all know in the Tobago space that the cost of living in Tobago is marginally higher than Trinidad. And we have the studies to show that. And if right now there's a conversation going on nationally about raising minimum wage, and the Minister of Finance has made some pronouncements that they would, come to a decision sometime around the budget thereabouts. So that if the central government decides that we're going to raise minimum wage nationally to $20 an hour, that if Tobago has the Tobago House of Assembly, that is, has the kind of power and latitude that we can look at the research that says to us that the cost of living in Tobago is higher than Trinidad, so that you cannot apply that same argument or that same,
it can't be across
the board.
Yes.
So that in Tobago you may not need a minimum wage, you may need a living wage, and that when we determine that, if it is, I'm just using arbitrary figures here, that they raise national minimum wage to $20 an hour, we in Tobago could say, but no, we can't pay people $20 an hour because that doesn't represent what is a living wage for Tobagoans, because of all this differences in our cost of living. So that our minimum wage is closer to $35 an hour, and that we can take that power and we can do that for our people. These are some of the things that autonomy does for us. It gives us the opportunity to look at what is happening in the Tobago space and make the best decisions for the people that live here.
Now, I want to bring the conversation back to the inter-island troubles that we're seeing. And we had a town hall meeting last week, and there was quite a number of suggestions and things put forward from the business community. Are you working on any of those at this point in time?
Of course, the Chief Secretary certainly gave his commitment that, one, we will start to examine the feasibility of resurrecting what we had in the previous Tobago Express that used to service the route. I think it was
the wet leased airplanes?
Well, wet leased airplanes, but as well as the company known as Tobago Express, because Mr. McFarlane was the one who stood up and indicated that when we had Tobago Express service in the route, that it was a Tobago company, it was owned by Tobagonians, it was operated by Tobagonians, because some of the complaints that we have about CAL are also their customer service, how they treat Tobago customers, and they indicated that having an airline that is owned, operated, managed by Tobagonians will begin to alleviate some of those challenges. It's something that we are definitely working on right now. We also gave commitments to, because the Chief Secretary read out a motion that he brought to the House in August of 2018, which spoke to the establishment of a transportation authority for Tobago, a transportation agency rather for Tobago, that deals with air, sea and ground transportation on the island. And that is a piece of homework that I've actually had on the books for a while, because even though I have transportation in my portfolio at the division, I am actually only responsible for one aspect of the transportation conversation. So I'm responsible for domestic air travel and domestic sea travel with respect to traffic licensing and even cargo handling. That is largely handled by the Division of Infrastructure. And then when you talk about things like public transportation, PTSC, that kind of thing, that is under Public Utilities, which is the Division of Settlements. What this transportation agency will aim to do is to bring all of those aspects together under one organization that is now responsible for managing all of the transportation needs of the people of Tobago. And that company would be empowered to make certain decisions. For example, advocating for more airlines to come in and service the domestic route, because the challenge we have there is not that there's a lack of interest. There is interest in companies to come in to service the domestic route, except that they don't have 7 schedule rights to do so, and they have to make the application to civil aviation and hope that that application is approved. And all of these things are managed by a central government. But when you have a transportation agency that is empowered to act on behalf of the Tobago House of Assembly, working with institutions like civil aviation, making sure that we do our background checks, we do our homework, we do our due diligence, that we could now move the conversation from CAL being the sole provider on the air bridge to having a more open and liberalized sector, where we have competition, because I think that competition would be good for Caribbean Airlines. I think it would give them the opportunity to look at their business model and to see where it can be maybe altered, changed, to come in line with some of the conversations they have been having about profitability. Competition also helps the consumer, because now you're not just pigeonholed into picking CAL, but now you have an option for another provider who can do the thing that you want them to do. And we were in that place. I could remember years ago when I used to be in school for in Trinidad for school on a weekend, coming up to Tobago on a Caribbean Star flight, coming up to Tobago on a Liat flight. These things used to happen because there, with BWE and all of these things, they had those kinds of arrangements where if something happened, you had all of these other carriers who could have picked up the slack at that time. We now have a situation where we've moved away from that, and CAL has consolidated itself to become the largest carrier in the region. But under the CARICOM Air Services Agreement, you have the opportunity for other carriers in the CARICOM region to come in and do some of the work that CAL has been doing, and we would like to see that actioned.
Certainly. And then coming back to the whole issue of the suggestions coming from the tourism stakeholders, especially that about the tourism standing committee, because I still also remember when that existed, and I mean there was it wasn't always perfect, but the conversation happened. Are you going to be playing a role, or is it something that the division or the THA is considering to see what they can do to make that happen again, so we can have that high level of conversation happening to make there is a success for tourism in Tobago?
Right. So I would tell you, since last year, for budget presentation, the Chief Secretary announced the establishment of we felt that that committee has to be made up of persons who are not just experts in the field, but persons who can represent a diverse number of interests in the Tobago space. Sometimes it's hard to find the best fit for some of these committees, but we are literally 95% complete with respect to that. In terms of the return of the standing committee, that happened under previous Prime Minister Patrick Manning, and that was all part of the tourism rolling development plan. There was an entire plan that was developed for the tourism sector that involved not just having a standing committee, but the government decided to invest a particular sum of money into growing the tourism sector, and it was during that time we had our best success on the Tobago end. I cannot say where the mind of central government is right now in terms of making those investments in the sector again. Yes, post-COVID, we got a 50 million to help with accommodation providers, and we got another set of money to help with ancillary support for persons who lost income during the COVID. But the tourism sector requires much more than that. And if it is that we're going to have the standing committee again, which I have no objections to, then certainly behind the standing committee, we also need the central government to put some money behind resuscitating the sector, some real investment this time, because $50 million could only go so far. $50 million for ancillary service support could only go so far. In fact, most of the persons who received those checks already have spent those checks, and some of them are still coming out of the situations that they faced in during the COVID period. In fact, some sectors will take a little longer to recover than others, and some sectors have almost fully recovered. So when you hear people like Mr. Frank talk about the fact that he's had no slow period since the year started for reef boat operators, you can safely say that there is huge demand for this sector, whether it be people who come from Trinidad, whether it be international visitors, or even locals. People are looking for things to do, and going out on the beautiful Buku Reef is a beautiful thing to do when you have nothing else to do. Yes, but the thing is that you have other sectors that are still on life support. When you look at the fact that, because I take the opportunity sometimes to visit our hotels and the state of our hotels, the kind of money that they will get under an tourism accommodation upgrade program is nothing. Could probably only upgrade 5 rooms, but when you have a plant that has 100 rooms, and when you see that the rest of the region, the rest of the world has already changed out all of their appliances, and they painting over every 3 years, and they're doing massive upgrades of their plants every 5 years, and you have plants on the island that have never had a massive upgrade since they've been built. how do you compete? So it really means that we have to we have to put some serious money on the table in order to bring some of our plants up to the level that we're able to compete with others in the region.
But it goes to the conversation that it needs to happen together with making sure that there is that amount of people to come in to bring in the money so that the hoteliers, the accommodation sector, etc., they can all benefit and then reinvest in their products.
Right. So what I would tell you is that they created a national committee with respect to airlift. That was created sometime, I think, in May or June of this year, earlier this year. And as Secretary of Tourism, I have a seat on that committee. They also have a representative from TTAL. The committee has not met as yet, but I think with all of these challenges with Carl, I'm going to get an invitation to a meeting soon. I hope it's soon. But some of the terms of reference for that committee is looking at how do we treat with attracting airlift to the destination, Trinidad and Tobago. How do we put systems in place to ensure that we can attract particular kinds of carriers to the region? What do we have to do in terms of building out our own systems and infrastructure on the ground to become an attractive place for airlines to fly? So those are some of the things that are the work of the committee. The Minister of Works is also a member of that committee as well. I'm looking forward to those deliberations because the reality is that we have to get moving now. The rest of the region did not stay closed for the 2 years of COVID. You had some destinations that only stayed closed for 4 months or for 5 months or for 6 months maximum. Everybody has been open since 2021 basically, and Tobago was the last destination to reopen, so naturally we are still behind the pack. So that having a standing committee, if it's announced, I am happy for it because it means that we are in the same room with the people who are empowered by the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago to make certain decisions. And certainly when we stand in the room with them, we can directly articulate what the people of Tobago have said to us that they require in this time to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And with one of those suggestions or one of those things that you're all going to be advocating for is just make sure that the link is better between Trinidad and Tobago, because I mean when you look around the Caribbean, there's a lot of country states that would have several islands. I mean I immediately think of Bequia in St. Vincent, Carriacou in Grenada and so on, but they all have links to those islands. I mean, you may not have a plane to be able to fly directly to the island, but they make sure there are systems in place so that people could easily hop over.
I agree with you. You're preaching to the choir. I mean, over the weekend I saw that SVG Grenada Air actually started a twin otter service, 19 seats, one of those small planes. I don't know what is the appetite for small planes in Tobago, but I mean, it's an option as well. Because when you think about the fact that on an average day, let's just say, you may have about 50 people checking in for standby, trying to see if they get on. A 19-seater plane will take 2 trips and take up everybody. You understand what I mean? But also, one of the things that was raised in the meeting was the fact that people are of the view that the system that CAL uses to sell tickets is not the best system, because it doesn't put back into the system tickets that are used by persons. Let's say you buy a ticket for tomorrow, you travel today, that seat doesn't go back for sale. And if that is true, I don't know how true is that, but if that is true, then it means that the system is not the best, because it will always show that it is full. And I have had that personal experience, checking for tickets, and 3 weeks out you can't get anything. They're telling you can't get any tickets till September or till end of September. Even now, yesterday I was checking for tickets for JFK because we just came back from Tobago Day, and the air is ripe for Carnival in October in Tobago. People want to come home. The diaspora is completely on board with coming home and experiencing and having that experience, but they cannot book a ticket direct from JFK to Tobago after the first week in October.
Well, why is that? Probably a few more weeks.
Yeah, but why should we? Because we have the evidence to show that it is a flight that people subscribe to. Why should Tobago have to keep making a business case for Caribbean Airlines to fly when Caribbean Airlines is the national airline? Caribbean Airlines for the entire year has announced expansions into the rest of the Caribbean. They have announced additional flights to different destinations, Antigua, to Barbados, to St. Martin. They even spoke about going as far as British Virgin Islands. And you're telling me that Tobago has to make a business case for 4 flights
And I mean, a whole month in advance, because I want to get your reaction to what Minister Shampa Kajo said. That she did advocate to the Minister of Finance to perhaps add on some flights after the band leaders complained that there are people wanting to come, but they don't have flights to get here.
I'm fully aware of that.
What do you think about that? We need a whole month to decide whether or not we should add on flights in time for Carnival.
I think that that's unfortunate, because we have the historical data that shows that persons traveled for the October Carnival last year. We also have the historical data that shows that any long weekend in Tobago is oversubscribed to. We have the historical data to show that July, August is peak period. You cannot get anything smoking to come to Tobago. What other evidence is needed to make a decision? I'm not sure what other evidence is needed, but the evidence is there. We have the proof. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we have the proof to show that once the flights go on, and that is the thing that people don't, I guess maybe the people who are sitting in the chair making the decision may not appreciate. Persons want to be able to plan their trips months in advance. People are not going to wait till a month before or 3 weeks before to check and see. I mean, unless you're a diehard feta and you tell yourself you're coming regardless, and as soon as they put a flight, you're going in the airport. But the average person wants to be able to secure their passage to come, because that's the ripple effect. Once they can secure their plane ticket to come, then it means that they're going to book accommodation and pay down. Then it means that they're going to book for their costume, because they know they're coming and they have a place to stay. And then it means that everything that they have to do to get to that point, save their money, take a loan, go in a susu, borrow the money, whatever it is, they will make sure they do that to be able to have the experience they want to pay for. But if the first thing doesn't happen, which is the booking of the flight, it means that people change their mind. People are not waiting for 3 weeks before the carnival to book, because by the time 3 weeks come, the accommodation you may have wanted already gone. Then the band that you wanted to play with don't sell out. I mean, a lot of things happen as a knockdown effect of you not being able to sit back and ask yourself, should I be going to Carnival in Tobago this year? Yeah, I want to go. People want to book their tickets in July. People want to book their tickets in June. People are not waiting until September month end or first week in October to book. So recognizing that and understanding that means that we can't take a month to make that decision. People are ready to pay now. The band leaders have essentially said, look, we have a list of people in Trinidad who want to come and play mass. This is the evidence, but they can't come. So in the face of all of that, what more is needed to give the yes? What more is needed for us to get the thing? And it cannot be that we're doing this every year. If we're going to grow a product that has potential, because that is the thing that keeps, I think, stressing us out at the level of the planning of the carnival. You can plan a beautiful show. You can have all of the nice things that you want to have. You could have beautiful surprises. Mass bands could have beautiful costumes. And if people cannot come to enjoy it, it means that it's money wasted. And if it is that we have to continue to battle this year after year after year, we have to sit and ask ourselves if this is worth it.
Are you worried about the success of Carnival because we may not get the people here, the numbers here? Because the potential is there. I mean, we talk to the band leaders all the time, and they keep telling you how many people they have on the list just waiting to come. But the mere fact that they can't get here means that they also would suffer a loss.
They would. We are in our second year. And I mean, after having the experience we had in our first year, I think we took away many lessons from that experience, and we have applied it to the planning the second time around. But the one thing that is beyond our control is this airbridge situation. We know that the Port Authority will put on the extra sailings, and we're thankful for that, because they usually step in when they know that they're going to be peak demand. They have done that in the past. So I will expect that the same courtesy will be extended to us in this time. However, in our second year, as I said, we continue to have this challenge. Based on what happened recently with Carl, I think that it has put the issue on the front burner for us to find a solution within the next year. Because it's not about things happening and then next year we come back with the same conversation. No. We have the recommendations on the table. We have some possible solutions, some things that the THA can get involved in. So for us, the next year would be spent actioning some of those recommendations. And we would hope that in our third year of having the carnival, we will not be having a conversation about whether or not Carl will put on extra flights, because we will have something else in the space that is able to take up that duty for us in the absence of what Cal may or may not do.
All right, and I wanted to spend a little time even just talking about Carnival for 2023. In just less than 2 months' time.
2 months, yes.
2 months,
just about 2 months.
Right. I mean, there has been some talk about even just centralizing all the activities in Scarborough.
Yeah.
We saw at a recent consultation that a couple of the band leaders were not so much in favor. But there is also evidence that some more band leaders are in favor of having things within Scarborough. So I just want to speak to that decision for a little bit.
What we have found is that the majority of stakeholders in general are in favor of us centralizing the carnival in Scarborough, because the band leaders are just one section of that stakeholder grouping. You have a number of other persons who are part of the conversation, and from what I understand, most of the persons are in agreement that the Tobago Carnival, which is a product created by the Tobago House of Assembly, should showcase the capital of Scarborough and ensure that we what it does actually is help us with the budgeting, because now we don't have to build out infrastructure in 3 places to have activities. So it helps us to streamline the budget and reduce some of our spending, because one of the things that people don't recognize, it's easy to tell the government, yeah, we want Juve in Crown Point and we want this in Roxborough, but it's always at an additional cost. And it's when you announce that the thing costs this amount of money, people have problems and objections. So that streamlining all of the carnival activities into Scarborough actually helps us in reducing a lot of our infrastructure costs. In addition to that, from a management perspective, it makes things much easier, because now the police will confine most of their surveillance activities to where the activities are taking place, which is one physical location largely. You also have a situation where Scarborough presents the best option for all of the things that you want to do. There's easy access to Scarborough, there's parking in several places, you have many options to exit Scarborough as well. The challenge we had in Crown Point and Roxborough last year is that when you have a situation where it's largely one main entrance into the space and 1 or 2 exits, when you have that volume of people going into that space, you have a traffic nightmare. We had traffic nightmares created last year with the Juve, we had traffic nightmares with the Roxglow, and the reality is that nobody wants to be stuck in traffic for hours after they jump up and had a time of their life. So we felt that Scarborough gave some of the best opportunity for us to maximize the resources that we have in this space. In addition to that, the feedback that we got from masqueraders who were on the route last year, they thoroughly enjoyed the route. They thoroughly enjoyed being able to party on the waterfront, cross on the stage on the sea, pass through the highway. They said that part of the trip going up to Bishop's there was some of the best that they had, and they felt safe. It wasn't congested like Port of Spain. They felt they could spread their hands and Lego according to blacks. And Tobago offered the best of partying on an island, reveling in paradise. So I think that we want to build on that. I think one of the things that people have to begin to mentally disassociate the Tobago October Carnival from is comparing it to Port of Spain in February. And I think that is where we get kind of upset, and if we're not seeing things that look like what we see in Port of Spain. A band with 20 people can put on a beautiful portrayal and be better than a band with 1,000 masqueraders. How do you measure success? And for us, success is one, ensuring that we have a product that totally sells the idea of what Tobago is, what we're trying to put on the stage, the ritual, the revelry, the release. There's place for the mud, there's place for our traditional characters, there's place for our contemporary mass band. There's a space for everybody to come in the street and be part of the revelry. And there's also going to be this spectacle that we are creating for people to stand and watch. For every band that has 100 masqueraders, you have 1,000 people looking on. The carnival is not just for the people who play mass, but the carnival is for the people who are watching on. The carnival is the people who are going to derive economic benefit from the carnival. And what we've not been hearing in this space is how many people did derive economic benefit from the carnival last year. So you may have a few voices dominating the landscape in terms of, they might not have had a successful carnival as others, but I can tell you at the level of small businesses and entrepreneurs and service providers, they had a wonderful time economically for the carnival.
Yes.
There were car rental agencies. Most car rental agencies had no cars for the period.
We almost need to bring cars to Tobago.
Okay. Then we had people who supply things like tents and infrastructure not having. We suffered from that. On the day of the carnival, there was some tents that never arrived because they were still stuck in some event that they had the night before. So our small businesses and our service providers, their businesses were oversubscribed to. So it means that the economic benefit was there for them, and it's not like they were just being paid by the THA, because the THA had a very small number of events that it was managing, but it was all the other things happening in this space that drove the economy, from the man selling doubles by the side of the road, to the person selling corn soup, to the bars, to the restaurants, to the hotels, to the taxi drivers, to the nail people, to the hair people, to all of these people who are some way in a part of the economic ecosystem that is created out of having something like a carnival. A lot of these persons benefited, and I want people in Tobago to understand that the carnival is not the THA carnival. The THA might be the largest sponsor of the carnival, and yes, certainly the conversations with corporate, with the private sector are taking place, because there is interest from private sector to come in and support, but their support will not be as large as what the THA is putting in. We are making an investment, because if we build this product and this product grows throughout the years and becomes a huge earner of revenue for the island of Tobago, it's not going into the THA's pockets, it's going into the pockets of the people who are in the space. It's going into the pockets of the hoteliers. It's going into the pockets of all of the persons who are providing goods and services. And we want people to see it like that, to look at the opportunities that are created. So if you're not playing mass and you're not spectating, what business can you create that could now put you in line to benefit from some of the carnival dollars that would be spent in October?
Certainly. And then when we also look at the anticipation for carnival, we're also seeing that, or at least we're hearing from people, it's like, they're wondering if carnival is still happening, because it's been,
well, I'm wondering why they're wondering. Well, you see,
because it hasn't been the same anticipation as last year, because I guess the difference between this year and last year is that we were coming out of COVID last year.
Right.
So then Tobago Carnival was like the first real carnival.
It's your first year, so everybody's excited for the first year. But I think that last year came with a brand of bacchanal that kept it in the mouths and the minds of people. In the absence of anything, people were talking about the carnival, and for different reasons, This year, I think we've done well in terms of managing the PR of the carnival, because I think one of the things we recognized coming out of last year was that people were getting information in the media rather than they being directly spoken to and feeling like if they have a say. So, for example, you have the residents. We had a consultation with the residents of Scarborough, persons who operate businesses in Scarborough, and they were the ones who actually conceptualized the idea of how the night mass in October could be differentiated differently to night mass that we see in February. And that sense of ownership that comes from someone is talking with me rather than talking to me and telling me what they have sat in a room and planned, it means that people feel a sense of ownership of the product now. So that we have gotten that out of the way, we've satisfied those conversations, and those conversations will not stop. They will continue, because there is a channel for people to continue to give ideas and to give suggestions, to make recommendations, to raise concerns, because the secretariat is now open. We have ban registration going on. We have sent out a call for promoters to submit their events for us to put it on our marketing channels. We will be rolling out an aggressive marketing campaign, because you have to understand the same core team of people have been planning events for the entire year. So they move from February Carnival to Jazz to Heritage to now Tobago Carnival, and we have our Blue Food in between. So, the marketing will naturally overlap, but you can't make the Tobago October so prominent in this space that it's drowning out the other thing that is happening at the same time, because each event has to have its prominence, it has to have its space, it has to have its opportunity to shine until the next thing happens. So now we hot in Tobago October Carnival season. We just had Bago Jam last week Thursday. I understand that people enjoyed themselves thoroughly in Bago Jam. Bungie and Fayan brought down the house, and if at this stage people are still asking if it's happening, then I don't know what else we can say to convince people. But I will put it out publicly. The Tobago October Carnival 2023 is on. It is taking place from October 27 to 29. That is the weekend of the static proper carnival activities, but for the entire month of October, we have a number of activities that will be taking place. We have a few competitions, we have a few surprises to throw in the mix. So as time draws near, people will get some more information on that. And we invite anybody who wants to participate. If you're a promoter, if you're a band leader, if you simply want information on the carnival, check out the website, welcometobago.com. You'll get all the information you require there. And we're just encouraging people to Tobago to embrace the carnival, to own the product. This is your carnival. Right. And at the end of the day, you are the ones who are going to benefit the most from it.
All right. Well, Secretary, we're not done yet. We actually got a few more minutes with you, but we do have to take a quick break before we continue our conversation. So viewers, please don't go anywhere. We'll be back. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversation with the Secretary of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation, Ms. Tashia Burris, who was just on with us for a few more minutes. So we are going to make use of the few more minutes that we have.
Great.
I want to also get into, do we have a budget yet for the Tobago Carnival?
So we do have a budget. It's a tentative budget. It's tentative because we are still having some conversations with some sponsors at this time. So that's one. Two, there are also maybe one or two elements that we still need to add or tweak. So we just are waiting some final figures for that. What I could tell you is that in terms of what we would save for the logistical build out and the infrastructure build out, is that we're probably only budgeting to spend maybe $1.6 million on that. And as I said, that makes it cheaper for us this year because we're not building out infrastructure in 3 different venues to support activities. So that what you find is that the budget actually is more skewed towards marketing the carnival, because the infrastructure that you would see would be the basic infrastructure that you would normally see for February Carnival, those kinds of things. But a lot of what we intend to spend and invest money in is marketing the carnival, and not just marketing the carnival, but marketing the destination. And that is why our Tobago Tourism Agency is responsible for the marketing of the carnival, because we see this investment as not just being event marketing, but rather destination marketing. So it has become a natural part of their budgeting in any given fiscal year, because we've added this major product to our calendar. So that in terms of the budget, I should be able to, once we have our final discussions with the Executive Council, that announcement will be made in the public space, but it definitely would not be as much as last year.
No, there was a lot of criticism coming out of last year's carnival because the Joint Select Committee for Parliament stating that there was no profit generated, or there wasn't no real return of investment.
Right.
And I want you to speak to that. Mm-hmm. How does the conversation about a return of investment fit into the hosting of Carnival?
So the Joint Select Committee, in my view, was very misguided, basically. Or I don't think they have an appreciation that government is not going to generate any real revenue from a carnival. And I'll give you a classic example. Trinidad Carnival this year cost upwards of what? 100 and something million. And not even 100 and something. I think it was Taste of Carnival last year cost 100 and something million. And the return to the government of Trinidad and Tobago was 15 million. So when you see that Tobago will spend something like $10 million on a carnival, then you can't naturally expect that we will make back $10 million. It doesn't work like that. The math doesn't work like that. And Anselm Richards went into great lengths to explain that the investment made in our carnival is not for the government to regain revenue on the carnival, but it's stimulating economic activity in the sector. One of the reasons why we picked October, even though it's one of those months that's iffy for weather, is that we recognize when we looked at the landscape in Tobago that October is one of our lowest periods for tourist traffic, both domestic and international. One, because everybody has just gone back out to school, so people are not necessarily taking vacations and traveling at that time. And secondly, it's just about at the beginning of our winter season, so our numbers don't start to pick up till November, December, January. So that when we looked at what do we do to stimulate economic activity in the Tobago space during a traditionally low period, The product that we came up with was a carnival. It could have been something else, but we decided to go the way of a carnival because we felt that, one, there was an appetite in the space for the carnival. Two, this has been a long-standing conversation about bringing a carnival to Tobago around September, October. We did have the Tobago Fest happening years ago, that used to take place in September every year, and for reasons best known to who scrapped it, they scrapped it. But the reality is that for a long time the conversation has been had in the space. In addition to that, from a marketing perspective, when you look at the avid carnival goer beginning his carnival trek in Trinidad in February and ending his carnival trek in Tobago in October, it made it an easy sell for us, so that the business case was an easy one to create. And when we looked at the numbers coming out of Carnival last year, we definitely saw the economic benefit in terms of the investment that the THA made versus what the economy of Tobago benefited from the spend of the persons that visited. And that will always be the return on investment for us. How much did the hotels make? How much did the car rentals make? How much did the restaurants make? How much did the bars make? How much did the other service providers make? That will always be the ROI for us. It's not about people coming and give back the THA money and for us to prove, well, okay, we spent 10 million and we make back 7 million. That was never the consideration. It was never the argument. The thing about a product like a carnival, it was created as a product to stimulate economic activity on the island of Tobago, and we felt we achieved that last year, and we feel that we could continue to achieve that this year. And we feel that the more and more private sector recognizes the worth of a product like the carnival being present in the Tobago space, then there's going to be more buy-in from the private sector. There's going to be more investment on their end. So we hope to get to a place where the biggest investment in the carnival will no longer be from the THA, that the rest of the island and other persons who are not even residents on the island, because the diaspora has indicated their interest in also finding ways to invest in the carnival and invest in products coming out of Tobago, that at some point in time it will no longer be a THA product, but it would be a Tobago product.
All right, and we're certainly looking forward for that. But I know that you are out of time,
yes.
Secretary Burris, and I just want to thank you so much for being on with us and giving us those perspectives. And of course, you are always welcome back here.
Thank you so much, Kandace. Have a great day. Thank you.
All right, viewers, so thank you for being with us, and let's have a safe and wonderful day, and we will see you again tomorrow.